Completely changed the way.
अब आप अपने ड्राइंग रूम में बैठ के ही कर पा रही हैं. I can see it.
हाँ, but you know, face to face का अलग ही मजा होता है.
वो तो है.
It has its own charm, which we are missing now.
Yeah, that's true. That is.
Especially for me, I mean, when you know, teaching when I'm in the
YouTube and Facebook.
Okay, okay. Dr. Shweta, now it is on live on YouTube and Facebook.
Okay,
also.
all right.
Dr. Sri Kumar, shall we start or?
We have.
We still have a minute.
We still have 2 minutes.
We have a minute, yeah.
Okay.
We cannot start before time, no?
Yeah.
Railway times.
So me and
let participants join and settle, then we will start.
Yeah. So me and Dr. Shweta Kushalin, we were in various committees, and we really had some good time there. So.
Right.
Agreed. We did a lot of work as well, but that was fun because we did it together.
Yeah.
I think otherwise, I think the work we did would have been really boring.
Yes. Especially the website work.
No, not just the website, even the one where we chose photographs for the gallery and all of that. That would have been really exhausting and boring.
Correct. So somehow Professor Rishikesh Krishnan, he was putting us in the same committees usually.
Yeah. He must have figured out that we do work together. We work well. He must have thought, you know, these two should be put together. Get the job done, basically.
Yes.
Normally in committees, we have one person who does work. In our case, we had two.
Right. Absolutely. I think we can start now, right? So
yes.
It's already.
It's 11.
Yeah. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a privilege to have Professor Shweta Kushal with us this morning. And just for the information of Professor Shweta, I would like to tell her that we started this program on Monday, and we had one authors workshop which was conducted by Cambridge University Press.
Okay.
And next day we had a very interesting presentation on research library support services by Dr. J.K. Vijay Kumar, who is in KAUST University, Saudi Arabia. And day before yesterday, that is the third day, we had Mr. Jay Bhatt from Drexel University, United States. He spoke on several Google tricks we can use to find data. Rather I would say find relevant data. And today we are very grateful to you for having agreed to speak.
It is my pleasure.
Speak on a very important topic, that is the importance of communication in interpersonal interaction. So this is, I personally feel this is a very, very important topic. We all should have good communication, and especially in libraries, obviously we need to have, because we cannot have all the books, all the databases in our libraries. So somehow we have to, with our communication skill, tell our faculty or user that, we don't have it, but somehow we can help you. So I personally feel that is the communication is very, very important. So with this now, I would request the President of Management Libraries Network, Dr. Sri Kumar, to introduce Dr. Shweta Kushal, and then we'll move further. So over to Dr. Sri Kumar.
Thank you. A very good morning to all of you and to Professor Shweta Kushal. And let's all be staying safe. Thanks very much, Dr.
I think there's some problem at Dr.
Yeah.
Sri. Dr. Sri Kumar, we cannot hear you.
He's got hanged from his end. He need to reconnect.
Okay. Please bear with us for a minute, Sri Kumar.
Topic which is which is most important to all of us.
Dr. Srikumar, can you start introducing her again, because we were not able to hear you. So can you start from the beginning?
Shall I start from beginning?
Yeah,
Yes,
because we didn't
yes.
hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm sorry for that. A very good morning to all of you and to Professor Sweta Kushal, and let us all
Thank you. Good morning
please
to you all.
staying safe. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks very much, Dr. Akhtar Parvez Saab, dear Professor Sweta Kushal, dear Malignant family, dear delegates of the Malignant International Virtual LDP. A hearty welcome to the day 4 of the LDP. Day 4 yesterday, we all listened to Mr. Jay Bhatt of Drexel University on the very interesting topic, explore some fun Google tricks and quench your knowledge curiosity. Quite informative and insightful to us, and I hope we all have benefited from it. Today, we have a very special guest from IIM Indore, Professor Sweta Kushal, with a topic which is the most important to all of us, information professionals. In fact, this is the lifeline of our profession. And I take this opportunity to extend a warm welcome to Professor Sweta. So, Madam, it's a pleasure to welcome you all. Welcome you to the Malignant LDP.
Thank you. Thank you. It is my pleasure.
Yeah, in her session today, Professor Sweta Kushal will talk on importance of communication in interpersonal communication. I'll repeat the topic: importance of communication in interpersonal communication. Professor Sweta Kushal is in the communication department at the Indian Institute of Management, Indore, India. She earned her doctorate from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, India. She teaches various aspects of communication and behavior, such as presentation skills, emotional intelligence, business etiquette, and others to MBA students and practicing managers. Her current research interests include communication, social media, gender and media, and advertising. She has published in the Taylor and Francis Journal, South Asian Diaspora, and have directed many full-length play productions. She's very passionate about theater and other forms of cultural expression. She is the founding director of the Dramatic Society at IIT Madras. She also chairs the Internal Complaints Committee at IIM Indore. So friends, let's welcome Professor Sweta Kushal. Over to Dr.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Srikumar. Thank you very much for introducing Dr. Sweta. And we really wanted a short CV from Dr. Sweta Kushal, and she, I think, sent shorter than what we required. But let me also tell you that she's. I'm not sure she is still member of the powerful IIM Indore board or not, but I think 2-3 years, for 2-3 years she was there in the board. Another thing which is very important that I must tell you, that she was in the website committee of IIM Indore. I was also there in the committee, and whatever website you see today, it is her idea. It was conceptualized by her, and the website which you see, I mean, I suggest that you must go and see the website of IIM Indore. You will realize, you see, the conceptualization by Dr. Sweta Kushal. So before I hand over the mic to Dr. Sweta, let me just say a few things. I would request all the participants to kindly write their questions in the chat box, and to the extent possible, please avoid greeting, because what happens if you write all greetings, then it becomes very difficult for the moderator to pull out questions from the chat box. And but yes, if you have anything to say, you can raise your hand and then we'll address that. And Dr. Meena Log will be sharing a feedback form towards the middle of this session or end of this session, and then you can fill that up. And also please avoid multiple logins, because it deprives others to log into the system. So with this, Dr. Sweta Kushal, I'm very happy that you are with us, and I request you to kindly start the proceedings. And thanks once again.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your kind words and your introductions, Dr. Srikumar and Dr. Parvez. I would just like to start with a good morning to all of you, because if we are talking about communication, I think basic greetings are important. And when we just jump into things, it's not much fun. Okay, so good morning to all, and thank you for being here. And let's start. Let's start with the day. And I have a short presentation which I will be sharing with you all, and this is what it looks like. So what I'm going to talk about today is importance of communication in interpersonal interactions. Now there are three words here that I would like to focus on for a bit: communication, interpersonal, interactions. What we mean by these words is the art of communication is the art of relaying a message, right? When communication is a two-way street, we all know that. If I'm sending a message, there is a medium, there is a receiver, there is feedback, and that's the communication loop. So there's a sender, there's a medium, and there's a receiver. And then when the receivers or the listeners, when they respond to the sender, that's feedback. Feedback can be of any kind. So that's our basic communication process. Interpersonal. What do we mean by the word interpersonal? Interpersonal is between two people or more. It's largely accepted to mean two people or more. It may not necessarily be one to many. It's usually one to one or one to two, not more than 1 to 4 on any given day. And when we are talking about interpersonal, there is something between two persons, basically. Interpersonal interactions, yes, of course, we live in a social world. We are social animals, as we've been informed since we were children. I would like to say we are social beings rather than animals. I hope we have all evolved, beyond just being animals. So we are social beings, and as social beings, interaction is one of those things that we do on a regular basis, in a regular way. Formal, informal, cordial, casual, all kinds of interactions are there that we participate in. So that's unpacking our title: importance of communication and interpersonal interactions. Importance of communication is there, and I'm going to talk about how these things work as we go forward. So, sorry, just give me a second. Okay, what is our basic goal as librarians, as service staff, as support staff? Our basic goal is to provide service excellence in any given platform, in any given space. Even for me, even though I'm technically not in the service industry, since I'm a professor, the goal is still service excellence. Why? Because what are we doing on a daily basis? We are working, and our work is geared towards other individuals. It's not self-satisfactory. It doesn't exist in a box. We are always interacting with other people, and that work has some kind of service value to the person in front. So the basic objective of any activity that we carry out in our professional lives is service excellence. The first question we need to remember: who are our customers? Now, why did I use that word, customers? Because customers comes from the word custom. Custom means to customize. So on a daily basis, depending on who we are interacting with, we customize our interactions. We change the way in which we interact. For example, all of us have different relationships in our lives. We are professionals. We could be parents. We could be siblings, spouses, children, all of these relationships that we have, friends, colleagues. In these relationships, across these relationships, we behave in different ways. We customize our behavior depending on the way in which we want to interact with the person in front. For example, the way I would interact with my mother is probably not the way I would interact with my friend. Because that changes, since we customize our interactions and our inputs into other people's lives, that's why I've chosen the word customers. Who are our customers? Who are the people we are constantly looking toward, and who are the people we are looking to serve? We have external customers. What do we mean by external customers? People whom we don't know very, very well, people whom we have limited interactions with, people who are there as on the periphery of our existence. They are not always there. They are there sometimes. They are there, not there other times. And especially for somebody who works, say, in a library, as most of you do, the interactions with external members are very, very high. These are how we classify external members is acquaintances, people we meet seldom, and people who are interacting with us for largely transactional reasons. So that's the part that is external. For example, somebody comes to borrow something from the library, they're an external member. They're an external customer. Somebody comes to access a resource and has a very short 1-minute interaction with the library staff, that's an external customer. Then we talk about internal customers. Who are internal customers? Our internal customers are people we interact with on an ongoing basis. Frequent visitors to libraries. I remember when I was in school, so we had a library period every week. Now that library period was there for everyone. At the same time, you could approach the library at other times, depending on, for example, we had an activity period and all of that, or in the lunch break. So our librarian used to have her lunch break at a different time. Now, I was one of those people who started out as an external customer for the library, which means I only went during the library period. And then as time went on, I became an internal customer because I was such a frequent visitor to the library that my librarian, over time, the librarians there was interaction, there was conversation, there was a relationship that was formed. So internal customers are people whom we interact with on an ongoing, repetitive basis. So these are our colleagues, our bosses, our subordinates, people who frequently visit our workspace, people who are constantly engaged with our work life. These are our internal customers. When we talk about service, when we talk about providing any kind of support and service to people around us, then our internal customers are the ones who push that service excellence. They are the ones who make sure that our processes and our interactions have value. These are our internal customers. Why is it important to recognize both? Why is it important to recognize both? Because, sorry, just one second. Because without knowing which is which, we do not know how to moderate our interactions. See, interpersonal interactions happen with people in all walks of life, whether they're external, whether they're internal. However, if we do not know how to recognize one or the other, then we get stuck in not understanding what we are trying to do. Therefore, it is important to recognize both, because in order to differentiate between the levels of interaction that we need to be part of. Okay, what are effective communication strategies? There is communication, and then there is effective communication. So effective communication strategies, we have, so I'm going to start with a small exercise where we think about co-workers we have enjoyed working with the most. So if you could just, take half a minute and think about the co-workers that we have enjoyed working with the most. And then what communication strategies do they use? What are the strategies that they have employed? What is it that makes them so easy to work with? What is it that makes them so much fun to work with? I personally feel that honesty is one of those things that really helps. When we are direct with somebody, when we are clear about our communication, when we are being on point with our communication, that's a very, very important tool in a professional environment. So when we do not beat around the bush, so I'm going to come to the strategies later, but this is just so that we get our mental juices flowing. Effective communication strategies, I need you to keep in mind these two things as we go forward. Now, what are the kinds of communication problems and issues that we have? What are our communication problems or issues with library users, with co-workers, with supervisors, and with subordinates? So library users would be external customers. Co-workers, supervisors, subordinates would be internal customers. And self-assessment. Which are the areas that we need to improve in? So coupled with the previous message where we are thinking about who are the people we'll enjoy working with, who are the people that we like to interact with on a daily basis, and What is it that they're doing that makes them so amenable, that makes them so approachable, and that makes them so desirable as social interaction and professional interaction as well. So keeping that in mind, if we can think about what is the self-assessment that we need to take care of in order to understand what is it that we need to improve upon. So it could be any number of things. So when we talk about strategies, then we'll talk about the ways in which we can improve upon those strategies. Food for thought. What do these mean? Connection, collegiality, cooperation. Connections. When we meet somebody for the first time, we have an instant like or dislike. Usually most people have this kind of instant dislike status with people when we meet them. That's a connection. It could be a positive connection, it could be a negative connection. A connection is momentary. It's a spur of the moment thing. It happens then, and it can lead to collegiality or to animosity, depending on what our first connection was, whether it was positive or negative. Sometimes, even if it's a negative connection, if we are open-minded enough, then we can change that negative connection to collegiality. It doesn't always have to be that a negative connection will lead to animosity. And then when we have established collegiality, we move to something called cooperation. Any questions so far? Anything that is not clear? If somebody can, maybe put the questions together, I can answer them bit by bit, if that's possible. Okay, all right. I'm just going to go ahead until somebody tells me.
I'll do that. I'll do that little later.
Sorry, sir?
I'll do that little later.
All right, thank you. So when we have a positive or a negative connection, depending on that, we move to collegiality, and that collegiality then leads to cooperation. Collegiality comes from the word colleague. Colleague means in league together. So co-league, they are in league together. When they are in league together, they are trying to do things together. They are trying to push things together. That's the idea of collegiality. And then we move to cooperation from there. How are these things communicated? Connection, collegiality, cooperation. Connection is communicated by the interest we show in conversation, by the interest we show in an individual who is in front of us, or on the phone, or on email even. Connections can be established over email, over text, over anything, depending on how promptly we respond, how well framed our response is, and what kind of gestures and movement accompany that response, the non-verbal components of that particular response. The connection is formed. How is collegiality communicated? Collegiality is communicated by a willingness to work together, by establishing the fact that I'm willing to make an effort in order for us to push this particular point or agenda further. It could be anything. It could be as small as collaborating on something like this, as big as something like this, where you collaborate together, you organize, or it could be something as small as figuring out where a particular item is. It could be either of these two things. And between, anywhere in between. The spectrum moves from very, very trivial, very, very small collaborations to extremely large organizational collaborations in which we see how people interact with one another. And then we move to cooperation. How is cooperation communicated? So connection is communicated by promptness, collegiality is communicated by willingness, and cooperation is communicated by initiative and suggestion. When we suggest, when we take initiative in order to be able to get some kind of input and movement across a particular platform, that is cooperation. What barriers exist in the way of these things being realized? The barriers that exist, the first and most important barrier that exists is our own preconceived notions, our own prejudices, what we think about people, how we think about people. For example, when we meet somebody for the first time and we have an instant dislike to them, and after that dislike, we decide that I'm never going to speak with this person again, that is a barrier. That is a very, very strong barrier. What are we doing? We are completely cutting out an entire individual and over time, an entire group of people from our interactions. That's what we are doing. So this is one of the barriers. The other barrier that exists is thinking always that I'm right. So when somebody suggests something in a collegial manner, we take it personally. We think that they're attacking us. They may just be suggesting it, but we think that they're attacking us. We take it personally and we get offended. So always thinking that I'm right is another barrier. Then we have confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is a huge communication barrier because when we think a particular way about something or someone, we are always looking for ways to corroborate that particular thought. We are looking for situations and behaviors which will tell me that yes, I thought this and this is correct. Interestingly, the brain is a very powerful thing. It's a very, very powerful tool. It can make you believe what you want to believe. We only believe what we want to believe, even when we have evidence to the contrary. So, therefore, confirmation bias, what it does is that even when there is evidence that tells us that there is something about this person that is positive and we are in a negative frame of mind, or vice versa, that there is something negative about this person and we are in a positive state of mind, we are going to not be able to see the differences. We are only going to be able to see what we want to see or what we want to hear. That's what happens with confirmation bias. Now, these are the barriers. How can we cultivate connection, collegiality, and cooperation? So these are some of the barriers. I'm not talking about all the barriers. When we are trying to cultivate connection, collegiality, and cooperation, suspension of prejudice, the willingness to learn, putting egos aside and not taking things personally. These are some of the things that we can do in order to cultivate these things, which in turn, what do connection, collegiality, and cooperation do? They allow us to have a cordial working environment, first and foremost, but that's not the only thing. Connection, collegiality, and cooperation allow us to foster relationships, form long-term relationships, and be able to work together not only as an official or as a professional, but as a society, as a community, which can then lead to social and communal development. It could be social and communal development of a group. It could be social and communal development of a small section of society, of an organization, of a team, any of these things, which in turn allows for people to be largely, happy people. General principles of effective communication. Be brief. Brevity is the soul of wit. One of the most overused sayings, at least when I was in school. Brevity is the soul of wit was one of the things that our teachers used to say. What that means is when we are brief, when we are to the point, the person in front is clear about what we want. However, brevity does not mean that we are not complete in our communication. So being brief is important, but at the same time, that brevity has to come with complete communication, which is precise, which is clear, which has all the components in it, but at the same time, it doesn't go on and on and on. Be assertive. Now, what do we mean by assertive? Is assertive the same as aggressive? Is assertive the same as pushy? No. Assertive means I know what I want and I'm not afraid to communicate it. But it does not mean I know what I want and I don't care what you think when I communicate it. There are two very different things. Assertive is I am very clear about my position and I'm going to communicate my position with politeness, with courtesy, with care about your reaction and your emotion in this particular situation. On the other hand, aggressive or pushy means I know what I want and I'm going to get it no matter what you think. That's the difference between assertive and pushy. Being assertive is important because when we are assertive, we tell the other person that we mean business. But when we are aggressive or pushy, what we do is we tell the other person that we mean business with or without them. That's the difference. Be direct. Yes, be brief and be direct. Be clear. Be straightforward. Direct communication always yields better relationships and results as compared to circumlocuted. For example, I'm going to give you an example. The word fine. So when somebody asks you and you say, oh, I'm fine, that's fine. But when we're angry and we say, sure, fine, that's not direct. The first one is, the second one is not. It's the same word. But the way in which we have used it, in the first one, we actually mean that we are fine. In the second one, we are saying, I'm angry with you. That's why I'm going to use this slightly heightened tone of, yeah, I'm fine. Why? What did you want? Yeah, I'm fine means, okay, I'm really a little bit upset right now and I need you to maintain distance or whatever else, however else you express your anger. So that is not a direct way of communicating. Of course, non-verbal communication has its positives, has its benefits as we say, and it is imperative. It is part of who we are. Non-verbal communication is cues are what make a communication assertive. They make a communication direct. And they can also make a communication indirect. Be clear with direct. How are they different? Clarity in speech, clarity in communication comes from clarity in thought. We can be direct without being clear. So round and round and round and round, or convoluted sentence structures, the way in which we communicate with somebody, not just what we say, but how we say it. When it lacks clarity, the person in front will feel that we are being direct, but will not know what we are saying. So that's why clarity is important. Be honest, extremely important. I wish to do this. I am hoping for this. What that does is that it puts me at the center of that particular interaction. It puts me at the center of that communication. There is an investment when we use I statements. And what do we mean by being honest? Honesty in communication. Okay, let me break it down a little bit. We all feel that, oh, but I'm a very honest person, right? All the time, most of the time, we feel that I'm a very honest person. There is no problem. I'm not sure why this is being brought up. Honesty in communication is not just honesty of speech. It is honesty of emotion. It is honesty of intent. It is honesty of initiative. What we mean by that is honesty of emotion means when I say that I feel a particular way, I mean that that is the only way I feel and there is no hidden agenda. Normally in communication, and I'll talk about why that happens, we tend to always have like a subtext. And if it is subconscious subtext, it's still better than conscious subtext. When we are loading our words, for example, when a parent says to a child, fine, do whatever you want, that's a loaded text. That is not an honest statement. It's passive aggressive. It communicates a kind of rancor towards the other individual and it creates problems. That's why what we mean when we say honest. And ask for feedback. Why do we ask for feedback? We ask for feedback to see whether our communication is effective at all, whether this word is operational or no. Because if it is not effective, we will know from feedback. Now, audience or people we interact with, they give feedback in all sorts of ways. More often than not, people give non-verbal feedback through gestures, through language, through tone, through body movement. All of these things become non-verbal feedback. Sometimes we may give verbal feedback as well. All of these in our daily lives, when we include these things in our daily lives, we will end up establishing connections, collegiality, and cooperation. Okay, empathy, empathetic interaction. Empathetic interaction. When we talk about empathy, what we mean by empathy is that we feel for the other person. We have a certain human connect with another individual. So there are two kinds of information. There is two kinds of communication. There is content-based communication and then there's relational communication. Content-based communication is focused on the what of the message. It's largely about the words being used. It's largely about what I'm communicating. So very transactional. Content-based communication is very transactional. Somebody comes to me, I'm at the I'm at the circulation desk of the library. They are issuing a book. They give it to me. I issue it to them. They say, I want to take it for whatever number of days. What are the procedures? When do I need to read all of that? That is a content-based communication. Very transactional, very clear. The what of the messages, I want to issue this book. Okay, all right, here it is. There you go. Thank you. But the how of the message is the relationality, and that is where the empathy of a message comes in. Now, the what of the message in this example that I just cited, where I'm at a circulation desk and a person comes to issue a book, the what of the message doesn't change when there is a how of the message. I can be surly. I can be disrespectful. I can be polite. I can be welcoming. All of these will change the way in which the experience of the person who came to issue the book will change. The how of the message is my attitude towards that particular moment of interaction. How I relate to that moment and how then, because of my relationship with that moment and with that interaction, my relationship with the person in front changes. That's the how of the message. The content of the message remains unchanged. It's a very transactional message. I need to issue this book. Okay, all right, thank you very much. But if I don't say, if me as somebody on the circulation desk, I keep the person in front waiting, I don't look at them, I take the book and I slam it on the counter, all of these are how of the message. How of the message comes from the non-verbal cues that we give to people. That's the difference. The what of the message is the verbal cue, the how of the message is the non-verbal cue. Primary purpose of the content is to exchange information or data. That's it. Content related communication is only about exchange of information. It's extremely transactional. So, for example, this particular interaction that we are having, I'm hoping it is not just content based. I'm hoping that there is some relationality that I'm able to establish by the time we are done with this. However, largely when we are doing any kind of process based presentations or communication, it's typically content based when we are looking for something. So if you're looking to subscribe to a new software and you need to write to the person who provides that software or the organization that provides it, that's content based exchange of information or data relationship kind of a thing. However, when we demonstrate relationship of and reception by the participants, so I may be writing to somebody to subscribe to their software. The manner in which I write and the way in which my email or my communication is framed, the reading between the lines, all of that will make sure whether I have a relationship with this person going forward or no. That is the difference between the relationality and the content needs of any communication. In the relationality, what we normally do is that we are able to establish a certain moment of camaraderie and a moment of comfort for the other person. That is the idea of empathy, making the other person comfortable. It comes from caring about other people. Communication styles. There are different communication styles. There is passive, there is aggressive. I'm going to first talk about these two. What is a passive communication style? Indifferent would be another word for it, or it could just be a receiver, always receiving communication, always wanting the other person to make the effort and not really being forthcoming with our communication. That is a passive style. Aggressive, I've already discussed it in connection with assertive. Assertive is different from aggressive. What happens in aggressive is that there is constant pushing, there is constant desire to push my needs over the other individuals. Both of these are not empathetic styles at all. When we are passive, we are expecting the other person to make all the effort in that interaction and furthermore in that relationship. When we are aggressive, we want the other person to make efforts on our behalf to fulfill our needs, which is even more problematic. In the first one, we want the other person to still fulfill our needs, but we don't want to communicate those needs. So it's really complicated when we are passive, because when I'm passive and I have needs of communication or interaction with the other person, but I never take initiative, the other person always has to take the first step. When they always take the first step, after some time, they get tired of that particular process. Aggressive is I push my needs, and through that pushing of needs, I relegate the needs of the other person, not just to secondary, but to immaterial. And then we come to passive aggressive. Passive aggressive styles are when we appear to be cordial, appear to be collegial, appear to even be cooperative, but everything we say and do has a subtext. Everything we say and do has a hidden meaning. For example, fine, do whatever you want. When a parent says that to their child, they are being passive aggressive. So they're not actively telling the child not to do what they're asking, but at the same time, in their passive aggressive mode, they are telling the person, beware, be careful. I may be saying that do whatever you want, but I don't really mean it. That's a passive aggressive stance. And the last one is assertive. Assertive is direct, clear, straightforward, without alternate intentions. And it states the needs of the individual, of my needs, keeping in mind the needs of the other individual as well. So assertive is respectful, it is courteous, it is polite, it is direct but not rude. The passive aggressive style. So in any style of communication, there are feelings and then there are behaviors that exhibit those feelings. When we have resentment, Passive aggressive style when we have resentment. Why do we have resentment? Something has happened between two people which makes us resent this particular interaction. I don't want to be part of it. So what will I do? I will avoid direct responses. I will not respond to them when they need me to. But at the same time, in my head, I will think, what can I do to make this interaction or this person go away? That's how I will vow to get even. So I will feel resentment, I will vow to get even, and I will avoid direct responses. So the feeling of resentment leads to my behavior of avoidance. It leads to my behavior of harboring ill will towards the other individual. When we feel helpless and powerless, when we feel like there is no choice, we avoid eye contact and we feign compliance. So when we feel helpless and powerless, in an assertive style, I would express that helplessness and powerlessness. I would tell the other person, what you're doing right now makes me feel helpless. And I would say it in a nice manner rather than saying it in a way that makes the other person guilt trip. That's not the idea. The idea is to place the feeling right in the middle of that interaction rather than making the other person feel bad about that feeling. Why are we placing it in the middle of the interaction? To address it, but not to accuse them. There is a difference. So when I feel helpless and powerless in my passive aggressive style, I will pretend to be compliant, but I will not do anything. So compliance, bare minimum compliance. What I'll do is I'll be legal, but I won't be ethical. What I mean is I'm going to manage bare minimum compliance in that moment, in that interaction, in that situation. But I'm not really going to invest myself in that particular situation. That's how I will demonstrate my helplessness and powerlessness. Repressed anger. Repressed anger comes out through sarcasm, through sniping, through indirect criticism, through backhanded compliments. Sarcasm can be creative, can be constructive when used in neutral situations. When we use sarcasm in loaded situations, we only tell the other person that we don't think very highly of them and that we would much rather that we don't interact with them. Indirect criticism of a backhanded compliment is an indirect criticism. You look good for a person your age, for example. That is indirect criticism. That means that while I think you're very old, you don't look it. That is indirect. That's a backhanded compliment. Indirect criticism and sniping, constantly, snapping at the other person, sniping at the other person, always giving standoffish, curt responses. That's the other way to express repressed anger, sorry. Now we come to the assertive style. What are the feelings associated with the assertive style? An assertive person is concerned about everyone or the other person's feelings. Everyone who is part of that interaction, I'm concerned about them. That's why I'm being assertive, so that there is clear and confident communication. I will maintain direct eye contact. I have a confident stance. I'm willing to confident open stance as compared to closed aggressive stance. I'm willing to have an open conversation about yours and my feelings, or yours and my needs, or yours and my requirements. It could just be requirements. We expect people to be self-accountable. What does that mean? It means that I am responsible for my actions to me and to you. It also means that I take accountability for my emotion, my action, my interaction, and my behavior. And when we expect others to be accountable, we take them at face value. So what we do is we ask them for what they need. We ask them for their relational needs or their transactional needs even, and we respect what they tell us. We do not try to fathom what they might be implying through all of these things that they are saying. In the passive aggressive style, the person in front, if I'm passive aggressive, the person in front has to constantly keep thinking about what is it that I really mean. In the assertive style, that need is eliminated because I'm able to clearly, directly communicate my needs. I'm also asking you about your needs. Now, if I'm an assertive person, I'm going to expect you to behave in the same way. And I will expect you to respond in kind with direct, clear, straightforward, confident communication when I ask you for your needs. Assertiveness toolbox. What's the first thing? Make a direct request. A direct request, not veiled, not underhand. A direct requirement. State it clearly without any, I want this. I would like that. Is it possible for you to do this? All of these are direct request frameworks and statements. A direct request as compared to, it would be nice, if if we were to at some point in the future do this, this, this. That's not a direct request. What the second sentence does, it would be nice if we at some point it defers the decision, it defers the request. When the moment I say at some point in the future, it's not really a requirement. So the other person has the choice of interpreting it the way they want. When they interpret it the way they want, they could just defer it ad infinitum. And when it is deferred, then I feel resentment because, oh, but I stated it and the other person never even took cognizance of it. They took cognizance, but I said at some point in the future. So they realize that they may have other urgent and important things to do, which they will focus on now. What this requires, when I'm framing my request in this kind of a standoffish or unclear or unspecified manner, what it does is that it requires me to follow up constantly. It also requires me to restate my request in more clear and assertive terms. So a direct request, clear. Please let me know if this is possible. If it is not, then I don't get offended. And if it is, then great. Declarative statements declare clearly what my intentions, what my needs, what my requirements in any particular moment are. That's a declarative statement. Making a declarative statement in interpersonal interactions is very, very beneficial because it tells the person in front that this is what I'm looking for. Calm confrontation. We feel that confrontation is not part of a communication. It is. Avoiding confrontation doesn't help because it leads to passive aggressive behaviors. So calm confrontation means we are polite, we are respectful, but we are still confronting the other person when there is an issue without being mean about it. Collaboration and compromise. Yes, it is very, very important to adjust. We've been hearing this. I've at least been hearing this since I was growing up. Adjustment in a situation is what we call compromise as adults. And collaboration and compromise are important in order for us to work together, to live together, to breathe together. When we do not constantly go into our neighbor's house, we compromise. We could have gone, but we don't. So we compromise. When we do something with our neighbor, we collaborate. Compromise and collaboration are the bedrocks of social living and accountability. I already mentioned that in the assertive style. When I hold myself accountable, then I am responsible for my actions, my reactions, my behaviors, my feelings, and I don't accuse other people of what I am going through. Cause of problematic behavior. However, all of these are very fine when we are not stressed. What is stress? Stress is a mental pressure that we wear on ourselves depending on the everyday needs of our lives. Let's look at this image for half a minute. So there is a lot happening in that image. There is a person who's holding his head. Why is he holding his head? Because there is so much that they need to take care of. There are papers flying everywhere. There are calendars that they need to look at. There are trends that they need to match. There are so many ideas in their head. And there is somebody on top of that yelling at them. It could be about, the person could be about deadlines. That yelling could be about them not doing their work. Then there is a clock ticking in the background. It's a boiling pot. It's a horrible boiling pot with a whistle that doesn't go. So what will happen? It'll burst. That's how stress feels. When we are stressed, all of this that we've talked about, respect and being kind to each other and being empathetic to each other, all of this falls apart. All of this. It is the one thing that kills anything, any relationship, any interaction. Okay, so stress, interpersonal relationships with co-workers and library users are the major source of stress for library faculty and staff. Major source. But at the same time, there's a catch. So of course, anything, anything that requires us to change or even slightly modify what we want and who we are leads to stress. But there is a silver lining. Hello? Is there a question?
No, I think they were talking among themselves.
Okay, all right. But at the same time, it is also a major source of satisfaction because it is the thing that tells us that our goal of service excellence is being achieved, or that tells us that something very basic, that I'm liked at my workplace. I cannot learn that I'm liked at my workplace without those interpersonal relationships and without those interpersonal interactions. So while it is a major source of stress because people have their expectations, people have what they want, people look at what they need, and all of that comes tumbling down at us. At the same time, it's also a major source of satisfaction because that's the thing that makes every single day worthwhile. Tips. Now, I'm going to talk about different ways in which we communicate with supervisors, with subordinates, and then the styles. This is where we start. We have to start with a positive outlook. Normally, we think about our bosses, oh my God, this person, oh my God, I don't want to interact with them. Oh my God, they are so tough. They are so pushy. They are this, they are that. No, think positive. Inform them about decisions, about movement, about what you are willing to do, what you're not willing to do, what is it that you can and cannot do, capabilities, all of these things. Inform the supervisor. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised about how they will respond to you. If there is something you find yourself hard pressed to do, inform them. Ask for help. They might facilitate it. Educate them. You might have a different set of expertise from them, or you might have different ideas as compared to them. Talk to them. Keep an open communication platform. Talk to them. Tell them, I feel that at this particular place we can do this or we can do that. Where I was working earlier, this is how we did things. Do you think any of that can be incorporated in what we are doing now? Inform them, educate them. Ask for help. Normally, we feel that if my boss has set a task, I must do it without finding or without seeking any kind of guidance. No, it's not required. We don't live in that world anymore where a child, nobody, actually, we never did live in that world. A child is not expected to walk on their own. They're taught. As we grow up, we learn things from our environment. We learn things from people we are with. We learn from our parents, we learn from our teachers, we learn from our colleagues, we learn from our friends, we learn from the playground kids, we learn from neighbors, we learn what to do and what not to do. But when we come into a professional setup, we feel that I must know everything already. It is not possible. It is not possible. Anybody even in the same situation will have a different way of looking at it. So if I am there and a colleague is there, both of us have similar tenure, similar experiences, similar lifespan, similar age group, and are at a similar position, their life experiences are different from mine. Therefore, their take on a particular situation will be different from mine. Therefore, I should ask for help. And if when we're talking about supervisors, they definitely have more experience usually, or more knowledge, or more insight. There is a reason they're sitting on that chair. When we think that, oh, you know what, while this is my boss, he shouldn't be or she shouldn't be my boss because they don't know anything, I can do it better than them. Every single individual has felt that way. Whether it is justified or not is another matter altogether. Support managerial decisions. When we are in a setup where the supervisor usually has the last say in what we do on a daily basis, or they are the deciding authority on a lot of things, it is important to try and accept those decisions. Because when we are constantly contesting those decisions, we create an unproductive space for ourselves. I'm not even talking about other people. The unproductive space is for ourselves, not just work-wise unproductive, but mentally, socially, and then all of that builds the stress up, which is what we talked about previously, and that stress leads to passive aggressive or passive behaviors. And last but not least, learn to speak their language. By that, I don't mean Hindi, Tamil, Telugu. No, I don't mean Urdu. I don't mean these languages. What I mean is try to understand the way in which their communication style works, and then accordingly compromise and collaborate. Tips for communicating effectively with subordinates: use assertive behaviors. Be clear, be direct, be straightforward. Don't give confusing information. When we are confusing with subordinates, subordinates get confused and they don't know what to do. Be discreet. Always, as an individual, I'm not even going to say as a professional, as an individual, let us be discreet. If somebody is going to talk about something to us, it is our responsibility and not just prerogative to keep it to ourselves. There are other ways of discretion. Discretion is also in decision making. Discretion comes in relationships. Be discreet about how you interact with people. Involve subordinates in decision making. What this does is that it allows the subordinate to have a stake in the decision. When they are involved in the decision, the chances of them implementing the decision effectively are higher. Give and request feedback. We always give feedback. We're very good at giving feedback, especially when it comes to our subordinates. But we never want it. We don't want them to tell us because we take feedback as a personal affront. No, it's not. It is just what they felt in that particular state or what they think. Just because I am the boss doesn't mean I'm the only one who can think. My subordinates can think too. Share information. Don't be secretive about decisions, about what we are trying to do, and then, you know, dump the decision on the subordinates without any background knowledge, without any background information, without any build up. Share information right from the word go. Share credit. Yes, yes, a lot of bosses never share credit. So what happens is you get a disgruntled employee, you get a disgruntled subordinate. They've done the work and you've not acknowledged the fact that they've done the work. In academic circles, not sharing credit is called plagiarism, right? We all know this. So then it should be called something in professional circles as well when we do not share credit with our subordinates. If I have a research scholar and my research scholar writes a paper and we co-author it, and I don't give them credit, I'm plagiarizing. I'm passing off somebody else's work as mine. I only publish it under my name. But it's the same thing when we take credit for somebody else's work. Just because it's not published doesn't mean it's not unethical and problematic. Thank them and praise them. It boosts morale, it boosts confidence. It makes people think that they are wanted. It makes people think that they're important. It makes people think valued. They think that they are valued. And all of these together result in us being able to drive our goal, which is the first slide that I showed, which is driving service excellence. Any questions at this point? I have a few more points, or should we take the questions in the end?
Yeah, we'll take all the questions at the end. We have about 4 or 5 questions. We'll take it.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Positive approaches to problematic interpersonal relationships. Just 1 second. Yes. Put what we call problem people. There are always people who have problems in a situation. Put them in perspective and don't take things personally. It is about the situation. More often than not, it is about that particular moment, that particular interaction, that particular situation, which is not about me. Me getting offended doesn't help. The moment I take it personally, I'm only going to aggravate the problem. I'm not going to be able to address it. So put the problem and the people in perspective and put problematic people also in perspective. Also, if there is somebody who always has a problem, we really should put them in perspective and stop taking things personally. They have a problem with everyone. So they will have a problem with me as well. So it's fine. Positive or negative, choose between the two. What we mean by positive or negative, in a particular situation, either I can think about ways in which I'm going to solve that problem, or I can have a negative reaction to it. I can't do both. There's only so much mental space and give that I have. So I need to choose between these two. That am I going to respond in a positive manner in order to resolve the problem, or am I going to have a negative response so that the problem gets aggravated? I can only choose one of the two. I cannot focus on alternatives and negative feelings. So I need to be able to think objectively in a particular situation. And don't expect difficult people to change. Difficult people never change. And yes, there are difficult people. I'm not going to say that the world is idyllic. It's utopic. Everybody wants to get along with everybody else. We are just, people who love each other all the time. No, if we did, we wouldn't have wars. We wouldn't have fights. We wouldn't have this constant conflict that we see in our world. So yes, there are difficult people. But what our problem is that we expect them to change. That's not going to happen. They won't. But I can. And you can. I can change in the sense that I can make it more cordial, if not by my behavior, by being polite, by being respectful, by giving them their say, by respecting the fact that they want to say something, even if I don't agree with it. And that they have a right to say it, even when I don't agree with it. Active listening. Active listening is listening without prejudice, listening without preconceived notions, just listening. Listening to the person in front to understand not only the content, but also the relationality of what they are trying to communicate. So content versus relational needs. Every individual has more relational needs than content needs. It's okay for once if I don't get the exact message. But if I get the emotion behind the message, I'll be able to understand what the message really means. Because the emotion is the thing that conveys the context. Active listening is listening without prejudice, listening without preconceived notions, listening without thinking, oh, this person belongs to this group, to this class, to this sector, to this society. Therefore, they are going to behave in a particular way. Because the moment I do that, my superlative machinery, the brain, is only going to filter information that supports my confirmation biases, which is one of the biggest barriers to communication. Respond, not react. What do we mean by that? A response is well thought out. A response is courteous. A response is polite. A reaction is instantaneous. It's spur of the moment. It happens right then and there without any kind of thought time in between what happened and how I reacted. So we should strive to respond. Okay, one thing before I go further, I always get this question, but how is this possible all the time? It is not. We are human beings. We will react. The idea is to be able to strive to achieve these things. We can't do it all the time. It is not possible. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. That does not mean we shouldn't try. These are ideal scenarios that I'm talking about. It's the perfect world. The idea is to try and create it. So yes, can I always respond? No, I will react sometimes. But the idea is to minimize those reactions in order that my interactions with people are longer lasting rather than reactive, momentary, spur of the moment bubbles that burst and then I don't probably speak to that person ever again. Empathetic outlook. Yes, I already talked about empathy. When we have an empathetic outlook, we will be able to do the others. We will be able to listen actively. We will be able to suspend judgment. We will be able to remove confirmation bias as a barrier because we will look at the person as an individual rather than the representative of a group or a community or a situation or I don't know, a union. I don't know, any of those things. For example, I will not look at a woman as a woman. I will look at a woman as a person. I will not look at a man as a man, but at a man as a person. That's what empathetic outlook does. It treats individuals individually. Empathy is about allowing a person their individuality, their space, and their reality in that particular moment. Be thorough and be attentive. Thorough about what I'm communicating, attentive about who I'm communicating to, thorough about how I'm communicating, what I'm communicating, the way in which my communication is going across, and attentive about the way in which it is being received and what people are giving back to me. Let's be thorough and attentive in our communication. Thorough is also complete, thorough is clear, thorough is precise. It follows all the 7 C's of communication. Conflict handling modes. So so I've drawn a graph. There is assertive communication and then there is unassertive communication on the y-axis. Then we have uncooperative behaviors and cooperative behaviors on the x-axis. Now what happens in the first quadrant? In the first quadrant, we get avoidance. Avoidance as a conflict handling mode. So what this is, it is unassertive and it is uncooperative. Therefore, chances are it is going to be unproductive. Obviously, avoiding an issue, never let anybody handle it. Now, competing is uncooperative. It is assertive, so it gets one checkbox on that, but it is uncooperative. Because it is uncooperative, it doesn't result in any benefits. Then we have accommodating, so it's cooperative, but the chances of us coming to a mutually agreeable solution are very, very low. Compromising sits bang in the middle of it all. It is a little uncooperative, it's a little cooperative, it's a little unassertive, it's a little assertive, and it allows us to manage situations as we go along. And collaborative is the ideal. Negative modes, when we are competitive, we are assertive and uncooperative, and our behavior is at somebody else's expense. That's what we do. We diss down people, we cut down people in order to succeed. Success can be attained mutually as well. When we are accommodating, we are cooperative, but we are unassertive, and we do what others want. This disregards our needs, and over time, it builds resentment. When we are avoiding, we are unassertive and uncooperative. We sidestep issues, and we don't address conflict. This could result in passive aggression. It could also result in resignation. Positive modes, compromising. It rests between assertiveness and cooperativeness. It seeks middle ground. It can satisfactorily solve problems, but it may or may not be long lasting. Because when I compromise in a particular situation, next time I will expect the other person to compromise in a different situation. And this kind of give and take is not very healthy. This kind of constant desire for give and take is not very healthy. Give and take is good. But when I'm constantly expecting the other person to do it because I did it the last time, then it may not be a long lasting solution. When we are collaborative, we are both assertive and cooperative, and we mutually find lasting solutions. Remember, win-win? That's what we do when we are collaborative. We think win-win, we collaborate, and we try to come to a place where it works for both people. Silence is not safe. Yes. Normally, we are told that silence is golden, silence is the key, silence is the best thing. But in any given situation, if my silence is loaded, if my silence is passive aggressive, if my silence is indifferent, then it's not safe. If my silence is resignation, then it's not safe. So what do I do? Conflict avoidance can be dangerous. It can lead to breakdown of relationships. It can lead to complete lack of communication. It can lead to complete discontinuance of any kind of interaction between two people. So we need to communicate for healthy conflict. What do we mean by healthy conflict? By healthy conflict, we mean a conflict that we negotiate together, a conflict that we get through together. We should speak up politely, respectfully, make our point, make it well, articulate it well, not just in terms of words, but in terms of emotions and our nonverbal cues. We should be constructive rather than critical. We should be constructive in our speech. We should give constructive criticism rather than just criticism. For example, be constructive so that the idea is that we are trying to arrive at a goal, we are trying to arrive at a solution. We are not just to have conflict, and seek input from everyone. That's the best way to avoid a conflict. Not to avoid, sorry, to solve a conflict. Conflict avoidance can result in conflict flagration. It can become larger. It can become so big that at one point it can disintegrate everything. So seeking input from all, bringing everybody on the same page, and communicating together with constructive, positive, comfortable spaces, in comfortable spaces, by speaking up and being assertive. That's what helps us in breaking down this culture of silence, which can result in disintegration. And in conclusion, just to conclude, practice self-reflection in order to understand in all of these, what are my areas of improvement? Where is it that I need to look at my own ways so that my interactions, we always talk about other people. We say, oh, but my boss, my junior, my subordinate, they do this. What about me? I must be doing something as well, right? I'm not perfect. Nobody is. Practice self-reflection. Trial and error. I'm sorry, but there is no one method. Different things work for different people. These are the larger guidelines of interacting with people in interpersonal situations. Mix and match. See what works for you. Take responsibility for your behaviors. Be accountable. Keep it together and believe that if I'm doing something, it is not because of this person, that person, that person. Blame. Blame never works. We need to stop doing that. Be a positive role model for others. If we practice all of these things or some of these things, we are likely to be positive role models. So while I may be somebody who has a short temper, but if I am polite in my communication of that short temper, if I am straightforward in my communication of that short temper, the chances are that people will respect me. Instead of if I'm yelling, if I'm shouting, if I'm dissing people, if I'm throwing them out of my office and these kinds of things, people are not going to respect me. That's the difference. So yes, you may be short tempered, but that doesn't mean that you have to be rude about it. You don't have to be horrible about it. You can still be cordial, collegial, cooperative, in spite of having a short temper. Effective intrapersonal communication is, and sorry, that should be interpersonal. Communication is an ongoing challenge for everyone. Yes, it is. Just because I'm, waxing eloquent about it right now doesn't mean I've got it all pat down. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. We are all just trying to reach a place where we can all live together collaboratively, together, and achieve certain communal, social, professional goals. Yes, the floor is open for discussion. I'll take questions now. Hi, is there anyone there?
Yeah. I'm there. I was
Sorry.
figuring out where the mic is. So there are a lot of questions, and I must tell you, it was indeed a great presentation, Dr. Shweta Kushal. And I was able to relate a lot of things, my interaction with my bosses and my interaction with my subordinates that I usually have. So I was able to relate a lot of things which you said. And one thing, which I liked the most was the avoidance of constant desire to give and take. I think if we stop expecting from people, I think all problems will be solved. No?
Yes, very true.
Yeah.
We're always looking for the other person to do something. We're never looking for ourselves. That's the problem.
Yes. Yes. So let me just ask some questions.
Sure,
That
please.
you see, first question is from your institute, Dr. Shweta.
Yes.
It is Tulika. So
Oh, hi, Tulika.
uh, Tulika has asked how an introvert person can improve her communication.
Okay, yes, an introvert person improving. I don't think introverts are bad at communication, frankly, Tulika. I don't think that's true. They're just selective. Okay, so how you can improve your social interaction may be a better question, first of all. I'm sorry for, changing your question. But I think introverts are very effective at their communication because they only communicate when they definitely want to. That's a very big positive. But how to change the way in which we do social communication? I think these are certain, it only comes with realizing that just because it is uncomfortable doesn't mean it's not necessary. The thing that introverts feel as discomfort in that kind of constant social interaction. But with small steps, little by little is how any monument is constructed. So similarly, we should be able to, introverts can try and practice certain very by rote things, so we do this in theater. There are certain exercises that we do on stage. Nobody is comfortable on stage when they go the first time, so when you are trying to open that up, so you do a certain kind of, so for example, greeting somebody every day, somebody we are uncomfortable with, even if we are uncomfortable, you still greet them. That's a very small thing, but it allows you to establish a certain kind of comfort with that individual. This is something that an introvert can try. And then consciously engaging in a conversation that is happening around us. You may not go to seek a conversation, but if it's already developing, if it's already evolving, I pointedly make it a point to make a contribution. And the most important thing, stop thinking what people are thinking. लोग क्या कहेंगे? लोग तो कुछ कहेंगे ही, उसका आप कुछ नहीं कर सकते. That's what they do. That's my three takes. But Tulika, we can talk about it offline as well. All right. Yes, please. Any other
Yeah.
questions? I hope that helps. I don't know if it does. Yes.
I wish she has asked all these questions to me when I was there for so many years.
It's okay. I will talk to her separately.
So there's then there's another question from Mr. Bowman. He is asking, in private sector, declarative statement is not acceptable by the management. What way to express our need?
I'm not sure if declarative statement is okay. Maybe the understanding of declarative statement is not, I have not probably expressed it well. What we mean by declarative statements is not a declamation. Okay. It's not about, oh, I'm going to do this and I want this and that's it. No, that's not a declarative statement. A declarative statement is stating requirements and needs as per the suitability of the moment. It can't just be only about me. So assertive, as I mentioned, is not just about me. It's about the two people or the individuals who are or even groups who are part of that interaction. So a declarative statement is not acceptable in the corporate world. I'm not so sure. But if it is not where you are working, then there are other ways. You can suggest, you can make suggestive statements. You can take initiative in order to demonstrate your need. That's the other thing that you can do. You can be somebody who takes the first step so that it's easier for you to get your needs addressed or your requirements addressed rather than taking a backseat and being passive about it.
Okay. So then Dr. Savita Nayak, she is asking how to deal students with non-assertive behaviors.
How to deal with students with non-assertive behaviors? Teach them to be assertive. I don't know.
Yeah. So,
Um,
Yeah, please go ahead.
Students having non-assertive behaviors, usually in a classroom, students are non-assertive. That's just how it is. Students are not expected to be assertive all the time, except when they are, asking a question or something. So a non-assertive classroom would be a blessing, honestly, if you ask me. So I'm not sure I'm getting the question right. Unless you're talking about bringing out something in them when they are non-assertive. You want them to be assertive, you want them to be more open, you want them to be more straightforward. In that case, regular coaching, regular mentoring, practicing, allowing them to interact in an assertive manner and in a safe manner. So when we tell them that they can be assertive and then we get offended, the next time they will not be. So, and when when they think they are being assertive, but they're actually being disrespectful and aggressive, we tell them that through constructive criticism rather than getting offended and shunning them. So we have to strike a balance between the two. But in order to get our students to be assertive as they go forward, yes, we have to coach them, we have to mentor them, and we have to create a safe environment in which they feel that if they're assertive, they're not going to be judged.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now then, Dr. Deepak Kumar Srivastava is from Kota, Rajasthan. Being a public librarian, we have to face many types of readers, but we are unable to face aggressive readers. So, what strategy?
We are able to,
but we are unable to face aggressive readers. So, what strategy we have to use to satisfy them? Yeah. And
okay, when you have an aggressive customer or an aggressive reader or an aggressive individual to deal with, what do? I'm going to, sound very, maybe, I don't know. Okay, I'm not going to use a word for it. Have very clear procedures in place. Very, very clear procedures and processes, and be polite but firm in implementing them. There is no other way. When we have people who are constantly aggressive about their needs, but we don't want to offend, but at the same time want to push back, the best way is to have very clear guidelines on. So for example, if I'm that aggressive reader and I want to constantly, ye nahi aapke paas, wo nahi aapke paas, kya kar rahe hain aap log, all of this. So how do I respond to that? I respond with, yes sir, ye nahi hai, so we are trying. Once, twice, third time. Third time when this happens, we turn around and say, you know what sir, why don't you take a look at what we actually have, rather than pointing out what we don't. And maybe we are not the right library for you because you don't seem to be able to find anything. Maybe we are not the right platform. Maybe what we have and your needs are not on the same page. So you need to have, and we need to also train our circulation desk to be able to respond in this particular way, not get intimidated, not get scared when they're interacting with these aggressive speakers, with these aggressive communicators.
Absolutely. So then we have another question from Dr. Muhammad Zubair. So his question is, you have mentioned the tips for communicating effectively with subordinates, but how to deal with them if they are non-cooperative, non-compliant?
Which is what I said towards the end. We're always looking at other people, saying they are non-cooperative, they are non-compliant, they are this, they are that. I'm sorry, but I can't change somebody who's not on this webinar. I'm sure I can't change the people who are on it either. I can only suggest. The way to deal with somebody who is non-cooperative again is to have clear rules and clear demarcations. For example, I'll give, maybe this will sound like a trivial example and probably irrelevant, but I'm still going to give it. So for example, when I start teaching a class, in the first session, I tell them very clear rules about deadlines, about things that they are expected out of them. So they know that if they miss a deadline, their assignment will not be corrected. And I implement it. It's not an empty threat. It's a clear consequence of action. So when we make consequences of actions clear for our subordinates, and they don't have to be rude actions, they don't have to be rude consequences, there have to be consequences for behavior. The problem is that if we are trying to be somebody who wants to be liked by their subordinates all the time, then I'm sorry, it's not going to work. So if we have an uncooperative subordinate, we need to tell them that this much and no more. There has to be a line that we draw. And that line has to be very clear, not just to that, but, and please don't do it just to make a point. Don't do it to make an example of an individual. Do it to send out a clear message to just that individual and maybe through ripple effect to other people, but at the same time, be considerate in that particular line. Make it realistic. It should be a realistic line rather than deciding that, okay, this much and no more, aaj mera ho gaya. No, they need to know कि 10 दिन बाद मेरा हो जाएगा. That's the difference. They need to know that there is a point beyond which I'm not going to take it. But they need to know what that point is in advance. The point cannot arrive immediately and post facto. That never works. That makes you an unreasonable boss. कि कल तक तो सर ठीक थे, आज क्या होगा? This is the response that we get then. कल तक तो मैम डेडलाइन के बाद भी एक्सेप्ट कर रही थी, आज क्या होगा? अभी मेरा घड़ा भर गया, लेकिन उनको बताइए ना कि घड़ा भरने वाला है, नहीं तो कोई फायदा नहीं है. They will not know. आपके घड़े भरते रहेंगे और आप उनको एक कोने में एक कमरे में स्टैक करते रहेंगे. That doesn't help anybody.
Yeah. Then there is Bushra Shamshad. She's asking a very practical questions, and
Okay.
the question is, we want to learn from our seniors, but problem is that either they don't know about the solution or they do not want to share their experience to their juniors. At this point, what should we do as a fresher?
I think you are better equipped to answer this question than I am, honestly speaking.
No, I feel that you see, all the librarians who know things, it is their responsibility, and what Dr. Shweta also said, that is, it is important to share. You know, unless you share, you will not be respected in your profession.
Yeah.
If you keep hiding things, you should not put anything below the carpet. So you have to be expressive. You have to share information. You have to share what you know, because if you share, you build up the second line in command, isn't it?
Correct.
Otherwise, what I have seen in many libraries, what happens that once the librarian retires or he resigns, I think there is no second line.
There's
So-
no succession planning.
Yes, so that is unfortunate. So this is my take, but Dr. Shweta, if you want to say anything on this.
How to get information from a boss or insight from a boss who doesn't want to share? Okay. If we only keep our interactions strictly about professional, it is never going to work. There has to be a social relationship with the people we work with. Social, but still appropriate. Let me make it very clear. I mean, after all, I chair the ICC of my institution. I have to say these things. Also, I mean them because it can lead to a lot of problems. By social relationship, I mean, when we only make it transactional, you know, we do not create that space, even ourselves, of an informal interaction. At the same time, fear, when subordinates operate from a space of fear, ki boss to sunenge hi nahi, that's also a preconceived notion, right? We operate from a space of fear that I'm not going to get to learn anything from this person. Therefore, koi fayda nahi hai. That is resignation, and that is not anything else. It is resigned, it is passive. But at the same time, in spite of all of this, if it doesn't happen, we've had so many teachers who didn't teach, right? In school, in college. खुद ही पढ़े ना तब तो, अभी भी पढ़ लीजिए. You'll get information somewhere else. You'll get data somewhere else. You will be able to get it from different people. Interact with people in your organization. Maybe since you have this kind of a platform, you have this kind of a network, interact with librarians from other places. They might be able to help you. Grow your network. Communicate with more number of people. The more we communicate, the more we learn. Without communication, we cannot learn. Yes, sir. I think Dr. Srikumar wants to say something.
Yeah, actually, I want to compliment you for threadbare discussing and giving the nuances of effective communication. Focusing on 3 pillars of collegiality, cooperation, and collaboration. I think it's a wonderful thing, and
Thank you.
The juniors, what they are expressing their concerns are sometimes true, but nowadays information is or knowledge is not coming from one person.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think
actually it was never coming from one person. You just think it was.
Yeah.
It never was. I remember. I mean, when I was in school, I mean, I have the high good fortune of coming from a family of extremely educated people.
excellent.
So I'm sure that's not something that everybody has. But I also know other people who are first generation learners. They went and found their own information. They went and sat in libraries. They went and spent so much time there. If one library was not okay, they went to others. There are public libraries. There are institutional libraries.
What I would like to underline here is that we are living in a very interesting open society.
Yes, correct.
It was not 25 years ago, 30 years ago, where things were actually
Just-
directional. It is
Yeah.
multi-directional now. So you have excellent opportunity. I think we should only open up our windows of learning. That's all.
Correct. Very
And,
true.
Yeah, I think thank you so much. The formal vote of thanks is coming. Akhtar sir, we have more questions.
I think we have a couple of more questions.
Sure, please go ahead.
No,
I'm
I think
sorry if I've overshot. I think I've grossly overshot my time.
no, not at all, not at all.
No,
But
it's
still,
really
this is yeah, this is the last question, and if still some people want to ask questions, they can raise their hands because we have few more minutes, about 7 minutes. So this question is from Surbhi Seth. I think she's from IIM Sirmaur. So her question is, I have a question. What we should do if can we only appreciate subordinate but cannot reward them? For example, I cannot decide the appraisal of my subordinate.
Sure, that's fine. Appreciate them publicly. Always appreciate publicly and reprimand personally. You scold somebody in front of people, they will always remember. You appreciate somebody behind closed doors, they never will. Appreciate publicly in a public forum with all kinds of fanfare, clapping, singing, dancing, distributing 5 rupees ka chocolate, small things, very small gestures, which don't have to be capital intensive. And they don't have to come from a place of, oh my God, I can't control this. But there are things we can control. So appreciating publicly in front of other colleagues and talking about in that appreciation moment, talking about what is it that we're appreciating, not just the individual, but the behaviors or the expressed outcomes or whatever it is that we're appreciating. That's one thing we can do without impacting their appraisal and their competitive advantage. Second thing that we can do, apart from appreciating publicly, is talking about whoever we've appreciated publicly and their positives in different forums, in different platforms, not just in that particular space, but maybe also in the platform which decides their appraisal. I don't know. If we are part of that decision-making body, we make it very clear. The third thing is please document your appreciation so that tomorrow when you need to be able to, when you are asked for your response, you don't do a knee-jerk response. You have clear documentation of their behaviors so that tomorrow their appraisal is actually, you can push it through that documentation. You can make it very clear to them.
Yeah. So I think we have received some more questions. So, then we have Ramesh Pandita. You did not talked about the importance of language in the effective communication. Choosing the appropriate language for communication is the foremost aspect of effective communication.
I'm sorry, but I disagree.
All right. Okay.
What we say is only 8% of the message. How we say it is 92%. There is established research for this. So communication is not about language. Dance communicates all the time. It only has music and gestures. I'm a dancer, so I know. Theater communicates. We watch foreign language films. We still understand them. It is not the language. It is the language register. Now, what is the difference? It's not what I say. It's how I say it. That makes all the difference. So I'm to answer Madam's question, I'm going to do a small short demonstration. So allow me, please.
No, it's a guy.
I'm going to use one word and I'm going to say it 4 ways. All 4 ways are going to be different and you will know the difference. The first one is welcome. The second one is welcome. The third one is the person is here, okay? Welcome. And the fourth one is welcome. Does it tell you? It's not what we say, it is how we say it. So I'm sorry, madam, but I disagree. Choosing the language, no. Choosing the language register, yes. If I'm going to be passive aggressive in my language register, that is what will get communicated. But if I'm going to be clear, polite, courteous, I teach business etiquette, so I always talk about courtesy. If I'm going to be polite, courteous, straightforward, and direct in my communication, as well as assertive, then that is what I will communicate, irrespective of the language that I use. But yes, of course, some languages are more beautiful than others. If you have access to that language, please go ahead. I completely second that. Some people use language very, very beautifully. And some people, they just kill it. So that is up to you. That is again language register. It's not about the language that we use.
Yeah, I did see one question from Nisa Singh, but I'm not able to see it right now. I'll read out other question. Nisa Singh, you can ask, okay, once we finish. Then there's another question. Educating your boss, don't you think it is difficult?
That's what I said.
especially-
Educating doesn't mean बैठा के पढ़ाना है. Educating means that when there is a situation, you make a suggestion, which is a different suggestion, which comes from a different space. Also, please, I already said this. Please don't ask me, oh my God, I have a tough boss. How do I deal with that? If you have a tough boss, they probably have a tough subordinate also. I'm sorry for saying this, but it's largely always true.
No, you do not have any control over choosing your boss. Okay?
And their behaviors, you don't.
Yeah, so you have to actually mold yourself to his style. There is a book, you must read that, which tells you about this particular issue, that you cannot change your boss, you have to change.
Managing
And yes, what Dr. Sri Kumar?
managing your boss, sir.
Yeah.
That's something I never teach, managing bosses.
Yes.
I never teach that session. Because it becomes a cribbing session rather than an informative, educative, collaborative session. It becomes a cribbing session. My boss is this, my boss. I never teach that session. I don't like it. I don't want to hear about what is going wrong with your boss all the time. Let's talk about what we can do right. But I think people don't. That's a very different frame of mind.
Yes, so I think there's another question, how to tackle a person who has negative thoughts. I think this has already been discussed, so I'll not.
Sir, so many hands are already
Okay.
raised for the question. So should we allow?
Dr. Shweta?
Yeah, please. One at
Okay.
a time, of course.
Okay.
So
No,
doc-
Dhaval, just
Yeah.
can I just finish this? One
yeah,
or-
sure, sir.
This question is good from Sham Rao. I don't know whether I am Indore, Sham Rao, or who. In the present scenario with users, soft skills are essentials for library staff. Library staff is facing some challenges with typical users. How to try to fix these issues? Soft skills.
What we've been talking about, right? This is all about soft skills. Means what? Soft skills means communication skills. So that's what I think the entire session was about that. If there is a specific question, then I would be happy to address it.
Yeah, here Miss Nisa Singh has asked, Akhtar sir,
Yeah, correct. You please read it out.
if you have an assertive style of communication, clear and straightforward, isn't there?
Isn't there a line of being considered as a snob or
Ah,
arrogant?
ah.
No, if you're polite, no, actually no. If you're polite, if you're courteous, if you're respectful, then you can't be a snob. It's not possible. And you're also accepting of the other person's communication. Just because I am straightforward doesn't mean I am straightforward and I'm done and I'm going to move off. No, the other person has space to interact in that same moment, right? So assertive doesn't mean aggressive. That's why I said there's a difference. Aggressive is I've said my piece, now I'm done. Namaste. No, that's not assertive.
Yeah.
Assertive is I'm saying what I wish to express. You have the equal right and responsibility and floor to express what you want to express. And if we are, frankly speaking, if we are respectful and polite, even if we are straightforward, the chances of somebody thinking of us as a snob are a little slim. And you know what? At the end of the day, if people still think that you're a snob, it's fine. It's okay.
How can we deal with stereotyping?
We deal with stereotypes by not formulating them in our own heads. That's the only way.
Yeah.
It has to start at home. It has to start with me. Non-stereotyping has to start with me, not with you. And I have to be willing to engage with the stereotype that you have of me and have a conversation about it, not a conflict. But I have to decide that I'm not going to stereotype people. That's the only way to deal with it.
Yes.
I cannot choose what other people think, but I can choose what I think.
Absolutely. I think now we can see Dhaval.
Yes, sir.
Now we
So shall we start with Dr. A. Ganeshkar?
yeah, please.
Sir, are you there?
I don't think he's or she's there.
So your mic is unmute, sir. So can you ask your question?
Hello, Dr. Gyanshekhar. Can you please ask your question? The mic is muted for him.
Is it?
Can we please unmute his mic? Yes. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, now it's unmute.
Good morning, madam. My question is already answered. Yes,
Okay.
thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you.
So next is Chirag Chavda. So, sir, your mic is allowed to talk.
Hello.
Yes.
There are certain guidelines for communication over in email, or
Yes.
you can say that professional communication in your
Sure.
office or your professional
Yeah.
work. So can you explain some, or can you guide some?
I'm sorry, but that's a 10-session course. But if I was to try, it would still take at least half an hour, 40 minutes for me to do it. I'm really sorry. Some of the things that you can keep in mind, quickly speaking, is be polite. Formal register of language is very, very important when we are writing emails. Using short forms, using shortcuts. These are very bad hygienically speaking in terms of visual hygiene. At the same time, not just formal register of language, we have to address the person appropriately. So if we don't know their, whether they are a miss or a mister or a doctor or whatever, it is safe to just use the whole name. I'm just going to talk about, very frivolous things, because if I'm going to talk about details, we actually take a 10-session course on this. I'm sorry, Mr. Chavda, but I'm not sure I'm being very helpful with your query. Maybe it can be a different panel discussion that we can do on a different date.
It will be my pleasure if it wild. It will be held.
Maybe you should put that on a ManLibNet network rather than asking me.
Yes, yes.
I'm sorry, I
Next.
don't think I've been very helpful.
It's okay. It's okay.
Next question is from Manju Dubey. Yeah, madam.
Good afternoon, ma'am. My
afternoon.
question is how aggressive behavior can be transferred into assertive behavior? And the second thing, ma'am, I also
One
wanted
second.
to.
Can I stop
Yes.
you for a minute?
Yes,
This
ma'am.
aggressive assertive is for self, right? Because if it is
Okay.
somebody else's aggressive behavior, I cannot help you.
Obviously.
Yes. So let me make this quite plain.
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Dubey,
And
it's my aggressive behavior and I want to be assertive and not aggressive, correct? That's the question?
right, ma'am.
Okay, all right.
One more thing, ma'am. If it is assertiveness is a permanent way of life or it is situational?
No, assertiveness is a way of life. Actually, it's a way of thought. It's not just being assertive is something you do only when you do it consistently and with practice. Just like people are aggressive when they are aggressive, similarly, people who are assertive are assertive.
Thank you.
So, but the first question, to answer the first question, how to be assertive when I'm aggressive? I think you need to temper it. What I mean by that is you have to put in checks into your behavior. You have to recognize when do you cross over from being assertive to aggressive, and you have to learn to put those markers there. I know it's a very vague answer, but movement from aggressive to assertive takes a lot of time, because most aggressive people don't know that they're aggressive. They think they're being assertive. So in order to be able to change a deep-rooted behavior like aggression, we need to identify what makes me aggressive. Why am I aggressive? And then switch those aggressive. First, you will only be able to switch the aggressive behaviors and not the aggressive feelings. The feeling switching will happen with time, but you can try to switch the aggressive behaviors. And one of the age-old, grandma's recipes kind of thing is count to 10 before speaking. Just count to 10. It will allow you to respond and not react. And if 10 is not enough, then count to 20. And if 20 is not enough, then just remove yourself from the conflict for a little while.
Thank you.
But that's one of the things that you can try to do. Think in responsive ways rather than reactive ways. Assertion is a way of thought. Assertion is not something that comes and goes.
Thank you, ma'am.
I hope that answers your question.
Yep,
Yes,
that
ma'am.
was very.
So next question is from Akhtar sir.
Well, thank you for this. I am Akhtar Hussain from IMT Ghaziabad, working with IMT Ghaziabad.
Okay.
My question is, how do you divide your time between delivering ideas and creating them?
Sorry, delivering ideas and
Creating them.
creating them.
How do you divide your time
Okay,
between
fine.
delivering
Got it.
ideas and creating them?
Creation of ideas is a very individual activity if you are doing it alone. But if it is collaborative, then it can be very productive. So you have to be able to, this is more time management than communication skills, but still I will try to field it, even though it's not my area. I think what we need to do when we are talking about dividing time between these two skills is that if we are doing it with a team, then it happens organically. It happens in that particular moment when, you know, everybody is together and you sort of brainstorm, you come up with a new idea, and then you express it right then and there. It coalesces on its own. You collaborate. There is collaborative effort, and you pen it down. But when you're doing it alone, you know, when the idea has to come from you, I think that requires a lot of some kind of solitary time. So set up solitary time in your week if you need to do it sometimes, or in your day if you need to do it daily. For example, as a researcher, as an academic and a researcher, I need to technically write every day, at least every other day. I should sit down and write. So I have very dedicated time to do that. Sometimes what I write doesn't make any sense, and I throw it out. But more often than not, it makes more sense. If I hadn't done that, I would never have finished my PhD. So you need to allocate that time. You need to decide that this is sacrosanct thinking time. My grandfather was a renowned Sanskrit scholar. Every morning, 4 to 7:30, before he went to work, was his don't disturb me time. You were not allowed to enter. He wouldn't talk to anybody. He would get up himself, get ready, make his tea, sit at his study table and work. Whether he's thinking, whether he's writing, whether he's reading, that's his time. You have to take it out of your day. You have to make time for it, time for yourself, for your mind. Because
Thank you,
idea creating takes time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Shweta, there is one question from my university staff.
Sure.
And the question is how to change lazy people. I think she should contact me, I can tell you, or that person can be sent to him, but I think you can respond anyway.
How to change lazy people? I'm not very good at this. Frankly speaking, I let lazy people be. I'm like, okay, you do what you need to do. But then maybe I can do that because, you know what, I interact with students on a term-wise basis. And but if I had a lazy subordinate, yeah, so I've had that. So if I have somebody who is reporting to me and who, hello, yes? Is somebody speaking? What's going on?
That was my mistake, I believe. I think
Okay, all right. So if I have somebody who's reporting to me and is not delivering on the deliverables, again, make deadlines sacrosanct. I've already said, hold them accountable, make them responsible for the delays, and have consequences. I'm sorry, this sounds like, you know, very Hitlerian and very dictatorial, but sometimes you have got to be very clear about what the fallout of a particular action is going to be.
otherwise
And
you
yes,
are not people being seated there. No, that also is another issue.
yes,
As a
exactly.
host, you are accountable to your higher-ups also.
Exactly. So if they're not doing their work and it is going to reflect poorly on them, on you, it changes the way in the team in which the team works. You have to allocate it to somebody else, or I have to do it. No, hold them responsible. Do regular follow-ups, documentation. Document your follow-up. Phone पे उठा के नहीं कीजिए, email पे follow up कीजिए. First reminder, second reminder, third reminder, death. Sorry, but that's just how it works. 3 is a good number, 4 is not.
Yes.
Maximum
True. And then, you know, the Nihar Patra has asked one question during presentation to the audience. How do we grab their attention, stimulate imagination, and develop understanding?
Very interesting.
Okay, I'm going to turn this question on its head and ask Madam Patra. I hope it's a lady.
No, he's guy.
Mr. Patra, if I have done any of these things today on this online platform, surprisingly, then you can just see what I've done. I think I've demonstrated it if I've done it. And if I've not done it, then I'm the wrong person for this question.
Very simple. Quality and relevance.
Yes.
Contextual. Then only things will be attentive. Otherwise, you
Quality and relevance. And more importantly, I think what we miss out on is the basic connect of humor. You know, we forget that we take ourselves very seriously.
Yes.
And when we take ourselves too seriously, our presentation becomes this really serious thing that I must deliver. And yes, preparation is good. So I'm not saying I didn't prepare for this. Of course I prepared. That's why I have a PPT.
Yeah.
But I have only prepared my narrative. I've not prepared my delivery. But you could prepare your delivery, but make it relevant, make it contextual, and make it current. If it doesn't add anything, add any value to the person in front, they are not going to pay attention. and at the same time be realistic. What I mean by that is, at any given point in time, if I can hold the attention 60% of the audience 60% of the time, I'm a good speaker. I cannot hold 100% of the audience 100% of the time. It is not possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So there are so many questions. So should we
What do
allow?
we do? I think Dr. Sri Kumar, I think it's too. What do we
Yeah,
do?
I think we will take those questions, Dr. Dhawan.
Yeah.
We will compile those questions and then we will pass it on to Professor Sweta for her, little relaxed reply, and then we can put it in.
Maybe you can curate the questions, put them together, make it like 4-5
We are
questions.
doing that. We are doing that. I think there is no words to express.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
I'm so happy that you came. Thank you very much.
So am I. I had fun.
We all had.
We all had, in
Yeah.
fact.
Thank you so much, Professor Sweta.
Thank you,
I-
Dr.
Dr.
Yeah.
Dhawan will.
Yeah. Now, may
Yeah.
I request someone from Manlibnet to please extend a formal vote of thanks to Dr.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, you are.
Yeah, Madam, this is Dr. Meeta Rathod from Surat. So a very good afternoon to the eminent speaker of today's session, Dr. Sweta Kushal, panelist of our webinars, Manlibnet EC members and dear participants. On behalf of Team Manlibnet, a very special thanks to Dr. Sweta Kushal for accepting our invitation to deliver the session on importance of communication, which is indeed one of the important skill requirement in today's library professional. In fact, I'll tell you, ma'am, that the last decade, due to this invention of this ICT technologies, libraries witnessed tremendous changes in its outlook. All library professionals were rushing to learn the new digital technologies. But implementation of these digital technologies in our libraries, we needed an effective communication skill to convince the higher governing body. So with that idea, we started with this LDPs also. We thought that we should not enhance only the digital technologies and everything, but we should enhance our soft skills, communication skills also. So with this, we started our librarian development programs. And today we have received one more idea, like Mr. Chawda said, we should have some sessions on how to write this professional mails. So thank you for that suggestion. We will keep that thing in the mind in our future LDP programs. So with these few words, from the very bottom of our heart, we express our sincere gratitude to Dr. Sweta Kushal for successfully conducting a highly effective session. Thank you very much, madam, for sparing your valuable time for this event. A big thank you to the participants of this sessions. The active participants of the delegates was very much reflected during the question answer sessions. So thank you very much to the dynamic audience. Manlibnet like to take this opportunity to sincerely thank the Parul University for their kind consent to use their ICT facilities for conducting this workshop. Special thanks to Brijesh Bhai, Chirag Bhai and the other technical team members. Also special thanks to our technical team for conducting this session effectively. Thank you very much to the entire team of Manlibnet for their shared vision and continued support. With this, we come to the end of today's session. We shall meet again tomorrow at 11 a.m. for another important and interesting presentation by Dr. S.K. Naqvi, Director, Center of Information Technology, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi, on the topic of using Google Classroom for the online teaching. And the link for the next day session will be shared by General Secretary on the registered email list of the participants. All the participants are hereby requested to submit their feedback form for this session. So with these few words, till tomorrow, goodbye, take care, stay home, stay safe. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks.